All right, so a pleasant good day, everyone. And today we'll be looking at the urinary system and body fluids. Granted, we did look at some of the introductory slides last week, but today we'll just do some as a refresher and then continue onwards as it relates to the kidneys and the urinary system in its entirety. Now, we mentioned last day in terms of the body fluids, when we think about the urinary system, one of its major functions is really to maintain the liquid content within our bodies, and that liquid content particularly is distributed among certain parts within our bodies. Ultimately, for instance, when we look at our bodies, these are the percentage differentials as it relates to the amount of fluids, and the fluids within our bodies, locations as it relates to intracellular fluid, or the cytosol, that's the liquid part within the cell itself, and the extracellular, that's the part in the interstitium or the area which surrounds the cell itself. Of the liquid which surrounds the cell, 80% is in the interstitial and 20% is in plasma. Of course, this relates to the blood components. And this is just showing the electrolyte and water distribution. These are the major electrolytes within the body: sodium, potassium, and chloride. And these have to be regulated in order to maintain homeostasis. Sodium, very important in terms of blood pressure, and we look at it more when we look at the functioning of the kidneys, particularly as it relates to renin, the renin-angiotensin system. The overall content, right, this determines body water content, and it fine-tunes in terms of shifting between the extracellular and intracellular compartments. The urinary system involving three types. So the electrolyte balance relating to those ions that we just highlighted there, that is important. Water balance, and of course, acid-base balance. We look at this at the end of the close to the end of the presentation. This is really the last topic we'll be looking at. So the components in terms of the urinary system, we have the kidneys, which for main function is to form urine, the ureters and bladder, which are the collecting system. The bladder, of course, when we think about the bladder, what type of epithelium should we think about as related to the bladder?
Transitional.
Transitional. So a nice way to think about it is when you're looking at the bladder itself. For those of us who are visual learners, you could draw like a pair of glasses on the bladder. Why you want to draw a pair of glasses, you might ask? Well, transitional lenses, those type that when you go out in the sun, they change color, they get darker and so on. So it's a nice way to key you in terms of alerting your memory, as to what type of cell type is present in the bladder. So you could draw, anytime you see a diagram of a urinary system, draw glasses, an outline of a glass. You could put in a nose as well and a mouth, right? But the glasses is the key. So that will lock you into the fact that transitional epithelium, that's the type of epithelium present in the bladder cells. Urethra, of course, this releases the urine into the external environment. And this is just showing the diaphragm itself. Sorry, the urinary system. This is the diaphragm, the major muscle, and these are the structures which we are speaking about. The kidneys, your ureters, empties into the bladder, which is then voided by the urethra. And this is a CT scan showing it in section, right? The left and right kidneys. And here, of course, is your liver and intestines as shown. And this is your vertebra. So this is just a cross section that is showing the urinary system. All right, so I want to say this is where we'll pick up from for today. So what are the functional units of the kidneys? All right, so one of the great takeaways, in terms of understanding the urinary system is to appreciate the functional unit. And if I were to ask you, what's the functional unit of the kidney? What would you say?
Balance water.
Right, so that's its main function. I agree fully, 100% water balance. Well done. And it does so by a lot of repeating units. And these repeating units, these are the nephrons, right? So when you think about it, the function, balancing water, and how it does it is by repeating units, which are known as the nephrons. So in terms of the nephrons, when it does its filtration, this is how the urine passes out from the nephron to the calyx, down to the renal pelvis, the ureter, and ultimately to the bladder. Let's have a quick overview, a revisit here, and see how this is done. I'm sure you all might have looked at it during the lecture. You all would have looked at this in your musings, but it's a very nice video to look at. Everybody looked at it, yeah? A silence so profound. Here we go.
It's a hot day, and you've just done several one after the other. The sudden urge that follows are two bean-shaped organs that work as fine-tuned internal sensors. They detect waste and to release the vitamins and minerals.
Excuse me.
The ingredients in your blood are constantly changing as you ingest food and drink, which explains why the kidneys need to be on permanent duty. Blood enters each kidney through arteries that branch and branch until they form tiny vessels that entwine with special internal modules called nephrons. In each kidney, 1 million of these nephrons form a powerful array of filters and sensors that carefully sift through the blood. This is where we see just how refined and accurate this internal sensing system is. To filter the blood, each nephron uses two powerful pieces of equipment, a blob-like structure called a glomerulus, and a long stringy straw-like tubule. The glomerulus works like a sieve, allowing only certain ingredients, such as vitamins and minerals, to pass into the tubule. Then, this vessel's job is to detect whether any of those ingredients are needed in the body. If so, they're reabsorbed in amounts that the body needs so they can circulate in the blood again. But the blood doesn't only carry useful ingredients. It contains waste products too, and the nephrons have to figure out what to do with them. The tubules sense compounds the body doesn't need, like urea, left over from the breakdown of proteins, and redirects them as urine out of the kidneys and through two long sewers called ureters. These tubes empty their contents into the bladder to be discharged, ridding your body of that waste once and for all. There's water in that urine too. If the kidney detects too much of it in your blood, for instance, when you've chugged several glasses at once, it sends the extra liquid to the bladder to be removed. On the other hand, low water levels in the blood prompt the kidney to release some back into the bloodstream, meaning that less water makes it into the urine. This is why urine appears yellower when you're less hydrated. By controlling water, your kidneys stabilize the body's fluid levels. But this fine balancing act isn't the kidney's only skill. These organs have the power to activate vitamin D to secrete a hormone called renin that raises blood pressure, and another hormone called erythropoietin, which increases red blood cell production. Without the kidneys, our bodily fluids would spiral out of control. Every time we ate, our blood would receive another load of unsifted ingredients. Soon, the buildup of waste would overload our systems and we'd expire. So each kidney not only keeps things running smoothly, it also keeps us alive. Lucky then that we have two of these magical beans.
Right. You're able to hear it?
Yes, sir, coming down to the end. I hear you.
Yes, later on, the volume raised.
Right, okay, great. So you can have a look at that, it's under
Yes, sir.
resources here. It outlines what we are looking at this morning. All right, let's get going.
Sorry, yeah, but you're saying kind of distant.
Any better?
Right, they get through.
All right, okay, thank you. Mhm. Okay, So in terms of the flow, so that was just an overview of the functionality of the kidneys and some of the structural adaptations which the kidneys have in terms of performing those things which are necessary to maintain that fluid balance. So when you're looking here at the urine flow from the nephron, these are the functional units, and as you saw in the video, there are millions of these within the kidney itself. Why do you think you have millions of them? One word. It's a bigger word. It begins with R, and it means over and over again. If something it begins with R, it's 4 syllables long, and it ends with Y, and it rhymes with redundancy.
So is it trying to say redundancy?
Oh, brilliance, brilliant. Yeah, redundancy. So redundant, when you have something that's redundant, that means it's repeated over and over. Same thing is being done repeatedly. And why do you think redundancy is important? Why would you want then, you have these nephrons, where you have millions of them. Why do you think they have so many of them in the kidney, right? The same, all of them do the same thing. Why do you think that is so? So why would you want to have all of them doing the same thing? In case what happens?
So in case of failure, one could always take in place of
There you go. Well done. So you have this redundancy, you have all of them. So let's say some type of trauma happens, boom, and all of this part of the kidney get damaged. Not an issue, all of these doing the same thing. So they'll just continue. So nothing will get shut down in that regard.
So it comes right back to balance.
Correct is right. I remembered one time somebody telling me about unions, and how sometimes unions do get in the way of progress. I will expand. So they're telling me that, with a union, unionized workers, each worker has specific things to do, right? And only that, they can't cross over into other person's work. So these union workers from a water company, they went to actually fix a water main that was in the ground. So of course, to fix the water main, you have the driver, right? You have the person who is actually dig the hole, you have the person who's fix it, and then you have the person who's helped them, right? So there's 4 of them plus the driver in the vehicle. So they reached there. But it so happened that the person who is to dig the hole wasn't there. So what do you think happened? So they just went to the site, and the person, remember, everybody has specific jobs. So the person wasn't there to dig the hole, so they just wait there a whole day, had a good time, and then they went back. And they did that for the entire week because that person was out for the week. But it just shows then, when you have specificity, when you have specific things being done just by one individual, it could hold back progress. So similarly, if in the nephrons, let's say you had a set of specialized cells over here that only did the filtration, and then it passed it on to another, their products were passed on to another part, let's say over here, that where you have the collection and so on. Yeah, that would be a problem. But since all of the cells, all the nephrons are spread out throughout the kidney, and they all do the same thing, it's not an issue if part of the kidney is not functioning through damage or through the fact that some either damage through blunt trauma or just, by some disease which caused them not to function. Okay, let's continue. No disrespects to the union. I hear what some people saying, sir, PSA looking to fight for 2%. So don't tell me no stupidness about unions. No, I just use that as an example. I didn't mean to tread on the toes of the PSA or any other union in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's go forward. So we have urine flow, as shown. It flows down, ultimately getting to the ureter, and it goes then to the bladder. When we are looking at the bladder has these folds in it called rugae. And what do those folds do? Anybody has a thought? What do those rugae do? They're very important. So they're folds.
So the folds you're referring to?
Yes.
I want to believe it increasing the surface area, or probably squeezing or something.
You know how it is. Let's say I don't know. I think they still have them. They just have water bag, ice bag, or ice pack.
Yes, so that's around.
Right. So you know how when an ice pack don't have ice in it, how it's
kind of sometimes we like a kind of jelly.
Correct. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I know which ones you're talking about. Yeah, and then you put them in the freezer.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct is right. the ones that take in ice, you know, where you have to fill it with ice. So it's like a bag, but when it doesn't have anything, you know, it has a lot of folds with it. But when you do fill it up with ice, well, those folds, you know, it expands. And that's what the rugae really is. They're folds, but it allows then for the bladder to expand and to get larger. Very important in terms of the underlying muscle is this, the detrusor muscle. And this detrusor muscle, of course, contraction of this. When this muscle contracts, what do you think will happen? The detrusor, if it contracts, would you A, urinate, or B, would you keep your urine in?
I might keep it in.
All right, when the detrusor, or not the sphincter, the detrusor.
Yes, sir.
So this
Okay.
detrusor muscle, when it
right, so you go
contracts,
push it out.
there you go. It's like
Yeah.
squeezing, right? It's like a hand squeezing a balloon full with water. So what would happen when the detrusor contracts, the water goes out. We have two sphincters here, the internal and external sphincter. Which one is under voluntary control and which one is under involuntary control, you think?
So external, voluntary, internal,
Right.
involuntary.
Very good. So this is the one we have control over, the external urethral sphincter. So therefore, when we do get the urge to urinate, and we'd see a video close to the end, that will touch on that. When we do get the urge to urinate, the detrusor muscle contracts, right? And now the internal urethral sphincter, this relaxes, but we have control over this one, the external urethral sphincter. And because we have control over the external urethral sphincter, we could hold it in. Is holding in your pee a good idea? We'll watch a video on that that will answer that question coming down to the end, okay?
So I have
Sorry? Oops.
so I have a question, sorry.
Go ahead.
When it comes to urine incontinence, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You know, they say that's where we lose control of the sphincter, but
mm-hmm.
having the internal sphincter that is not under our control, does that mean that something goes wrong there too?
Could be. So it all depends on the nature of the damage that is causing it. Could be the internal one, but most definitely when you talk, if something is wrong with the external, because you know, in terms of incontinence, it wouldn't come out unless the external is damaged, right? So there's like the pipe, right? So you know how, I don't know if we have any plumbers here, but sometimes when you're looking at plumbing, you know, you just have like a shut-off valve, and then you just have the pipe. Before the pipe, you have a shut-off valve, right? So there's a this one is under automatic control, but this is the one in which we have, well, usually, but sometimes, as I rightly say, through injury or otherwise, we could lose control of this external sphincter, or it just have some people, they just don't have the ability, you know, in terms of being potty trained. Right, they just, you know, we take it for granted, but it's really an override because the natural instinct is just to urinate like that. For those of us who watch animals, for instance, when you watch fowls or cows or anything like that,
True enough, sir.
when they walk in mid stride, you know, they walk in, they talk, and they say, "Hey, how you going? Yes, your feather and thing looking nice." Right? So it's involuntary and it happens automatically. It's just that we, you know, as humans, we have learned to control it, but some persons do have issues with it. And, you know, when they're younger, you know, refer to them as bedwetters and so on. Yeah. Let's go forward. So these are the muscles associated with it. The muscularis, this is within the ureter as well. And this is how you bring down the urine from the kidneys, right? The movement of this muscularis muscle actually facilitates the movement of the urine down. So it's not just like a straw. If it was just, and that is interesting that you have muscles within the ureter, which would mean that you could be in various positions and yet still the urine would still come through and empty into the bladder. That's very important. If you didn't have the muscle, yeah, depending on how it is, just like a straw, you know, when a straw is bent, yeah, you would have a backup there, right? So that's why it's important to have it. This is showing the bladder and ureters in section again, mid-sagittal view. And here we see the bladder, and here is the prostate. Note the prostate is really like a donut. Running through the prostate, you have the urethra. Swelling of the prostate then could lead to constriction of the urethra, such that this condition, which is known as loosely as stoppage of water, right? And in cases like that, we did mention how would you alleviate that situation? One, use a catheter. A catheter is inserted, a flexible catheter, and you will see it in your professional training in terms of when you're doing your urinary rounds. You will see those catheters, they have different sizes. Of course, they lubricate it, and they also use a topical painkiller as well. So then they lubricate with KY jelly, and they insert it along to get through. If the prostate is swollen, let's say by BP8, benign prostatic hypertrophy, which is a situation that causes the prostate to swell. And when it swells, it constricts the urethra such that water or urine flow, does not occur. Why does BPH happen? This is not on the syllabus, so I wouldn't get into too much detail. They're not actually quite sure why it happens, to be honest, in terms of the swelling of the prostate. Yes, there is genetics involved with it, but for certain reasons, for some reasons which are not well understood, you do have swelling of the prostate. Usually, however, it occurs in men, well, obviously in men, because women don't have prostates, over the age of 40. So from the time you do get it around age 40, it's good to have your prostate checked, in terms of prostate health. Wouldn't get into that. We look more into that when we're looking at reproduction. All right, so this is just showing urinary stones. Notice the size. And now this is the nephron and the associated blood vessels. So this is the functional unit, the nephron, and it consists of this glomerulus as shown here. Right, so this glomerulus facilitates the filtration, and this is just showing the pathway after filtration, the waste product in terms of how it flows through the descending limb, and then of course it gets into the collecting duct, and the collecting duct goes down to the renal pelvis. Now the blood vessels, these blood vessels are important, and we will see their importance very shortly in terms of facilitating. So we have the glomerulus, which does facilitate the filtration, but then the other parts which are very important in terms of tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion, these capillaries which surround the structure shown here, they are very important for that. Let's talk about the blood flow. So from the renal artery, here we are seeing, right, the capillaries which do branch off and they're surrounding then the nephron here. It goes to the arcuate and the interlobular. Then it comes, of course, here to the afferent. Note afferent and efferent. Afferent is the one that comes in, efferent is the one that leaves. So when you think about the word efferent, it's very close to the word effluent, which is like waste. So that's how you know when you think about waste, wasted leaves, so efferent is referring to then the arteriole that leaves. So after it goes in, the afferent goes in, forms the glomerulus, and then it leaves via the efferent arteriole. All right, and then from there you have the circulation. It's shown here, the peritubular capillaries shown, and then you have the interlobular vein, arcuate vein, and then back to the renal vein. And this is how the blood circulation that occurs around. So here it is, some going into the forming the glomerulus. Then you have the passage around the nephron, and it comes all the way back, and then it rejoins to the renal vein. All right. Arcuate vein. This is the arcuate vein. Arcuate vein going to the renal vein. Okay, so renal process. What exactly happens as it relates to the renal process? 4 steps, and do take note of them. You have 4 steps: glomerular filtration, reabsorption, secretion, and concentration. Could somebody think of a way for us to remember these 4 letters? F, R, S, and C. Could you think of a little rhyme or a little sentence so we could remember F, R, S, and C? So you could tie it to kidneys, FRSC. Fat, rat, sit, cool. Okay, no, that doesn't make sense. All right, give it some thought, but do remember these four processes are
Sir?
very, yeah, go ahead.
What about feeling really super cool?
Feeling really super cool. There you go. So you know anything about your kidneys? Yes, and they're working good. They're working good. So I'm feeling really super cool. I like that one. All right, I'll write it down if I could borrow it. Is it all right if I borrow it from you?
Was it cool or cold?
Huh? Cool. Is feeling really super cool or cool? Which one?
Cool. COOL.
COOL. Right. Right. All right. So.
I thought it was cool because my son's when you're feeling cool, you just want to urinate.
Oh, okay. Whichever one floats your boat. Whichever one, floats your boat. So feeling really super cool or cool, whichever one, that that will lead you to remember it. And those F, feeling really super cool, FRSP, SC, referring to glomerular filtration, reabsorption, secretion, and urine concentration. And that's what your kidneys do. Let's have a look again. So the processes along the length. So here it is, you have the first thing that happens is the glomerulus, so the afferent arteriole coming in. You have it splitting up even smaller sections. And the reason why it splits up, this is to increase the pressure. In terms of the functionality of the kidneys, the way it does its work is by pressure filtration. So that is always important to remember. The way the kidney does its work is through pressure filtration. All right. Right. So pressure filtration allows it. So the pressure then, what do I mean by that? The pressure when you're looking at the afferent arteriole here, it actually increases when it reaches down here and it splits up into these smaller parts. Right? The pressure goes up. This allows then for things to filter over. Very similar to Christmas time when you're making sorrel. Anybody here is make sorrel Christmas time? Or ginger beer? Anybody's made
No, sir,
ginger
I
beer?
just drink it.
I hear you.
Yes,
I ain't
sir.
mad at you. All right. For those of us who do make it, both. Let's say with the ginger beer, well, you had to grate it. You put it in some people just put it in water and you put it out in the sun. Anybody just put it out in the sun? Right,
Yes, sir.
yeah, for it to get hot, quote unquote. And then of course you pour it in the strainer. And after you pour it in the strainer, what you have to do? A word that begin with P. To get out all the liquid. There you go. Thanks, Karen. You had to press it down and squeeze it, right? So you push down in the strainer, and that's exactly what is happening here with the blood. So the blood is coming in, right? And it is going through. This, in essence, the glomerulus is like a strainer, right? So the walls of the glomerulus here, they are porous. So it's coming in, and when it reaches a certain amount of pressure, good, you could have the filtrate coming through. And the average filtration rate, as you saw in the video, right, is approximately 180 liters a day. OMG, isn't that a lot? When you think overall, for the kidneys, it's 180 liters. Think about a liter pack of Orchard, yeah? So imagine 180 packs of those. That is the work done by your kidneys. That is absolutely incredible when you think about it. Filtration, so the filtrate then goes down, right, as shown there. And after the filtration, you have reabsorption, depending on the needs of the body. So you will have reabsorption of certain ions, sodium, calcium, chloride ions. If the body so needs them, they are reabsorbed. After you go further down, then you have tubular secretion. If these ions, if sodium, they're in too much volumes in the body, you could have it being secreted then into the tubular fluid. And this tubular fluid, as we well know, then goes down and leads to urine concentration. Average urine production is how much? 0.8 to 2 liters a day. So imagine, the quote unquote 2 liter bottle. That's how much urine ideally, you would produce during the course of a day. So do remember those two numbers, 180, and we have 2. How could we remember those two numbers, 180 and 2? Could you think about something that will help us remember those two numbers? In terms of the filtration rate being 180, and then what we put in out there is 2. Right? How could you remember? You can think of anything, just like how when we think about chromosomes, you could think about Michael Jordan number or LeBron James in terms of basketball, their number is 23. So, so that's one way you could think about remembering chromosomes. How would we remember the number 180?
I think that the same pressure concern from 180 to 80 to 180, 60. I think it's 60 to 180, if I'm not mistaken, sir.
What in terms of 160 to
Although
180?
The blood pressure.
Oh, 120 over 80, you mean?
Blood pressure. Yeah.
Oh, 120. Oh, I hear you. So you can think about that and the 80 number, and you just put a 1 in front of it. I like how you're thinking, right? Yeah, I like how you're thinking, Kieran. Well done. So that is one way to think
what
about.
If you think about it like a formula, because we know that the filtration is sort of like the pressure. So we could say the pressure is equal to 180 and output is equal to 2.
Yeah. Or you could, I hear what you're saying. So if you're rounding off 180 to the nearest 100, right? If you're rounding it off 180, right? That'll be like 200. So therefore the magic number there is 2. So it's 180. I like how you think 180, right? That is the volume of blood. And then it's 2 liters of urine produced because that's at the end, right? So you remember it in terms of blood pressure, 120 over 80, we know that one, right? So the 120 over 80, so you know the one below is 80. So that is the one we're looking at. So 180, right? That's the amount of blood filtered. And then of course, if we round it off, it will be 200. So it's 2 liters of urine. I like that. So thanks for those contributions there. Thanks very much. That was Charles and Kieran. Thanks very much. Okay. So tubular secretion move the solutes from the blood. That's the only thing, do remember? So tubular secretion moves those solutes as it relates to iron, sodium, chloride ions. That's the only way in which those things are moved out of the blood and into the urine. As you're well aware, urine is a bit salty in its composition, and the reason why is because of tubular secretion. All right, filtration pressure. Filtration pressure, this presses the fluid, as we mentioned, very much like sieving sorrel, right? It presses the fluid into the capsule. And here it is, we are seeing it here, filtration. So the blood is coming in via the afferent arteriole is passing through. And this is the sieve, right? So the walls of the glomerulus are shown here. They do have holes, but they are small enough to allow different things to go through except blood. Blood doesn't, the red blood cells, if you notice, they're kept within the glomerulus and they are ultimately returned to the efferent arteriole, and then they do get back to the renal vein. So this is the sieve or the sieve or the strainer. The strainer is the glomerulus and it allows filtration of that waste to occur. So reabsorption now, let's speak to reabsorption. So when we speak about reabsorption, let's go back. Do remember, right, that when you're looking at, this is the nephron, right? So you have the filtrate coming through here, but it is surrounded then by the arterioles as shown here. So you do have reabsorption occurring in terms of nutrients back into the blood. Let's talk about it in a little more detail. So sodium, chlorine, glucose, these are the things that are filtered out initially. Water, urea, and potassium, depending on the requirements of the body, they will then be reabsorbed into the surrounding afferent arterioles that surround the nephron, right? So sodium is reabsorbed by active transport. Active transport means you're using energy to move it. So that means it could be moved against a concentration gradient. Normally for diffusion to occur, diffusion occurs from area of high concentration to low, down a diffusion gradient. But if it is then that you do need sodium, it is moved into the blood, back out of the urine into the blood by active transport. So then using ATP, you can actually move it into the blood against a concentration gradient. So even if the concentration of sodium is low, relatively low, when you comparing it to the concentration of the blood in the arteriole, you could move it against that concentration using ATP. Another thing that is reabsorbed, glucose, amino acids, and phosphates are also brought in by secondary active transport. Water as well is reabsorbed by osmosis, movement of water from its area of high to low. And urea, other solutes become more concentrated and they could diffuse into the blood. So it's very important when we think about the reabsorption in the proximal tubule. And the proximal tubule, that is the tubular region, which is very close to the Bowman's capsule. So let's have a look at that real quick. So the proximal tubule will be this area immediately. This is the Bowman's capsule. Within it is the glomerulus. So this region here is the proximal. This one, of course, by definition is the distal region because it's a little distance away. So proximal meaning close, distal far. So this is where you would have reabsorption occurring. Right. So how is this done? Well, so aldosterone is very important. And what does aldosterone do? And where do we get aldosterone from? Anybody? Aldosterone.
So is it related to blood pressure? No, like regulating blood pressure?
Yeah, it is. So when we're looking here, for instance, it's showing then for correcting aldosterone. So aldosterone is secreted by the zona glomerulus cells of the adrenal glands. So it's secreted within, from the adrenal glands, and they regulate TIN2 and potassium. Yes, somebody's having a little draw on the whiteboard. I am mad at you now. I am mad at you at all. Right, so the aldosterone secreted is normally regulated by angiotensin 2 and potassium. Is there a way to wipe off that? I think so. Over the screen, or that will stay forever and ever. Let me see. I should have a way to clean it off. Let me see. Anybody know how to wipe it off? I think somebody inadvertently you're writing on the screen. Is there a way to wipe it off?
Yes, sir, there is. My son's
Oh.
teacher usually do it when they turn right on the
Right
screen.
on it, yes.
I ain't sure how to do it. I just see him do it now.
Do it. Yes. Let me see if I could look at the controls real quick. Yeah, there's a way. Display settings. I'm sure there's a way to actually shoot that. Nope. To wipe the screen. Wipe screen. Oops.
So it's supposed to have a like a rubber right where on top of your arm. It's supposed to have like a little rubber right where the the icon is like a pencil and a rubber on top.
Oh, I see it. I see the pencil. Oh yes, I see the pen highlighter in color. I'm not seeing. I see the eraser. I'm seeing it, but it's not enabled.
Oh.
I wonder why. That is odd. But I see exactly what you're talking about. I don't know. So what I'll do, I'll close it off and come back in. That's usually, in terms of resetting it. So just bear with me just 1 second. But I am seeing it, but it's just not enabled. The both arrow options, highlighter. I've seen the highlighter option. I've seen the pen option, which was probably used, I've seen the laser pointer option.
Well, so use one of them, the highlighter, and just put it on white ink instead of colored.
And wipe it off?
Just, yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's check that. I like how you're thinking. Let me see if it works.
It's not working.
No, but that was a really good idea.
It's not working.
Yeah.
So on top, are you seeing view options?
I see display settings.
Well,
but
for
nothing.
me, I see in view options, and
Well,
when you
see,
click
could you
down,
do any? Yeah.
when you click it, have annotate, and once you click on annotate, you would see the eraser, and you would see clear. So I'm not sure if you being the host, you could just clear out the person's drawing.
I'm not.
Because I try, but I can't do it because I'm
Yeah,
not
and
host.
strangely enough, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it either. So what I will do, I'll do the old-fashioned way. I'll just close it off and reopen it. Yeah. Let's see if that works. Yeah. Just bear with me just 1 sec.